Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A real pleasure to have you here with us in London for the film festival. If you kick off with a brief introduction to your film, what can audiences expect when they watch it?
So my film Know Your Place is set in Seattle, Washington, and Seattle is one of the fastest gentrifying cities in the United States right now. So the story follows first generation kids of East African descent, Eritrean, Ethiopian, have grown up in Seattle. And they are the main character Robel is tasked with delivering a suitcase destined for a sick family member back home, um, across the city to a woman who's traveling back and bringing things on behalf of other people in the community. So it's sort of an intersection of a very sort of specific experience culturally to folks a part of that diaspora, but also looking at Seattle in this moment in this city with sort of rampant displacement and disillusion of community and gentrification, which I think is also being mirrored in many cities across the country as well as maybe the globe. So
And tell us about the genesis of the project. Why this story, and why were you compelled to put it on the big screen?
I grew up in the Seattle area, and starting as a filmmaker, I was shooting a lot of music videos and things like that for local hip hop artists in Seattle. And there was a place called Hidmo, which was run by a dear friend of mine. Her name was Rahwa Habte. And it was a restaurant, but also a space. She was an organizer in the community. And so it was a space for a lot of artists of all different backgrounds to connect, from music, film, poets, like other, community groups, all types of things. And so that was really formative for me growing up in Seattle, and also just informed a lot of the friendships. And so organically, I feel like a lot of my community and where I felt most seen happened to be with a lot of friends that were of East African descent. And so that sort of led into, just sharing stories with one another. And also, my roots being Iranian, there was sort of a cultural kinship in certain ways, a bit of an overlap, if you will. But yeah, so it was sort of years in the making in a way, but at the same time, the film itself happened fairly quickly. And so one of the things too was we cast the film in the community. So the whole cast of the film is all it's first time performers. The two leads were in a short film that I made a few years prior to that. But yeah, it's really a homegrown sort of project. Really trying to co-create a space and co-create and tell a story of what home means to you know many of us living in that part of the world. So.
It being your first feature, like you say, working with non-professional actors, what might have been some of the challenges that you faced along the way? But on the other side, maybe you had some personal highlights.
I mean, I think a personal highlight is that the film exists. I feel like that feels like a small miracle every now and then when I sort of go, hey, we can watch this from start to finish, and it's happening. It's difficult to make a film. And so I'm like, I've always appreciated filmmaking since I was a kid, but to really sort of be on the other side of a first feature, it takes a lot of work to make a great film, and it takes a ton of work to make a bad film. You know what I mean? So it's just like, I'm humbled by the folks that do it, and also so appreciative of the folks that show up to help make it happen. Cause it's an art form that you can author it to a degree, but you never do it alone. It's never in a vacuum. So I think that was kind of a highlight, is sort of capturing aspirationally. You need a sense of community behind something like this to see it to fruition, and that sort of was the wind in my sails, if you will. But yeah, the first time performing I felt like a natural way to do it because I was a first time feature film director, and so it was like it felt like equal footing in a certain sense, and we could really sort of give each other the space, if you will.
In terms of your approach, perhaps the look and feel of your film, do you feel, how would you characterize it? And do you take inspiration from other filmmakers you watch when you're growing up, other films, or do you think you've kind of absorbed things you've seen before and just created your own distinctive stuff?
I mean, you'd always like to think there's something distinctive about what you've done, but I feel on some level it's always derivative of something, right? Because there's so much cinema exists and it's so influential. But story wise, structure wise, I'm a huge fan of Iranian cinema. Like the stakes are never actually larger than life, but there's emotionally it can feel that way. And so I liked dramatically and structurally. I draw a lot of influence from that type of filmmaking. and just new wave in general, you know, from whatever country, global cinema. Um, I think the thing that was aesthetically, you were asking about aesthetics, that was very important to us was that the performances were intended to feel very naturalistic and loose, but we didn't want the aesthetic to follow that. You know, sometimes you keep the camera work really loose to sort of help blur the edges of the performance, you know, which can get a bit rough or just like you sort of like let it bleed in and feel a sense of reality with that. Whereas with my cinematographer, you know, Nico, we really wanted to do something that felt painterly and compositional. So kind of obsessed with that sort of visual approach. And so we kind of merged this feeling of like very off the cuff feeling dialogue, but with something that felt very intentional in terms of the framing and how we tried to structure the film visually. And so we wanted to sort of bring a sense of integrity to how we observed everything instead of getting as loose as the actors were. You know what I mean?
And what do you hope people take away from watching your film? Because I guess on the one hand, it's a very specific story, very specific community in a specific city. But like I was mentioning in the beginning, things like gentrification are happening all over the world. It's very rife here in London. So, you know, what might be, you know, the takeaways from the specificity, but also on a universal level?
Everybody's story is connected to everyone's story. And I think that's the thing is with both the approach of how we tried to make the film and tell this story and also the film itself, I hope people take away a sense of feeling connected to the themes and not observing it as it's separate or it's happening to people over there. Because what happens to people over there is inherently related to what's happening over here, you know, whether you're insulated from it due to privilege, which creates situations in the first place, or you're geographically apart from it, but it might be happening in other ways, you know, in your immediate community. So I think it's just that sense of interrelationship, you know, and we tried to model that, and again, like how we made the film, but also within the story itself. So.
And what does it mean to you to have your film here as part of London Film Festival?
It's surreal in a sense, you know, because we premiered at the Seattle International Film Festival, and then you know invited here after, and it was just entirely unexpected, honestly. And so it feels wonderful. It's such an exciting place to be. It feels really special to bring our little film all the way across the pond. Yeah, I think and it kind of relates to the questions you were asking in a sense. Is like it feels such a world away, and just being here in London, it's such the scale of the city, and it's so different that it was just really pleasantly surprising that there was an affinity or just some sort of relationship to what we were telling with our story, that was relatable in some way that, we were invited out. So it's definitely a feeling of gratitude and just we're taking it all in stride. So, yeah.
And how do you see, maybe kind of in a broader way, the cinema landscape right now, the opportunity to tell different sorts of stories in terms of representation? I guess also looking at the difference between US cinema and European and the
Right.
stuff we see at film festivals rather than the mainstream. 'Cause sometimes
Right.
it can feel quite
Yeah.
like different keep.
Disjointed, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think any story is too small. I think there's however many people there are, there's that many experiences, So I think the well is almost infinite. So I just feel like what we might perceive or the industry might perceive as a risk or something that's niche or whatever, I just don't feel that actually exists in a sense. I think we've chosen to normalize certain things while marginalizing or alienating other things. And I think hopefully as we hurtle on into the future, we can sort of reorient and recognize that it's just a matter of what's on our radar and it's not a matter of what is actually important versus not important. So I think there's an infinite opportunity to keep telling all kinds of stories. So.
Definitely. And can you tell us what you might work on next, and what kind of are your greatest ambitions in terms of, I don't know, people you want to work with, or places you'd like to film?
I feel like I'm still I feel like my greatest ambition is, can I make another film? You know what I mean? It's like, I'm like trying to keep it pretty level, but yeah, there's a couple projects sort of in the works right now. I'm work fairly I wrote this first film on my own, and I'm writing another film with a friend. It's kind of the older brother maybe to Know Your Place, and it's set in Los Angeles. So that one's in the works, and then the other one is about an Iranian immigrant in the early '80s how he ended up coming to America by way of Italy. So that's going to be an interesting sort of project that I'm hoping to kick off soon. So, yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with us. Really enjoy presenting your film here in London.
Thank you.